Hey guys, enjoy these new 20 stories. We hope you enjoy them. Let us know your thoughts. And as always, most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button too. It's free and does so much for us. We're forever grateful. Now to the stories.
I had no idea my breakup with Lana would end up like this. I mean, who could have predicted that the woman I thought I loved would steal all my credit cards and try to max them out the same day we broke up? Honestly, I didn't even realize what had happened until it was way too late. The whole situation was bizarre, and looking back now, it almost feels unreal. But it's true, and it still messes with my head. We had been together for about a year. Things started off pretty normal, at least I thought they were. Lana was one of those people who could charm anyone, and I wasn't immune to it. She was funny, pretty, and always knew how to make me laugh. She made me feel like I was the only guy in the world. But slowly, things started to shift. Over time, she became clingy, like really clingy. She would text me all the time, call me every minute, and question where I was, even if I was just out with friends. It started to wear on me. I was a pretty independent guy, and I didn't like feeling like I couldn't breathe without her knowing what I was doing. I tried to talk to her about it, but she'd always turn it around and make me feel like I was the one who didn't care. The worst part, Lana had a temper. When things didn't go her way, she'd throw tantrums. And not the cute kind. I'm talking about full-on screaming matches, throwing things, and storming out of my apartment. At first, I tried to make excuses for her. She had a tough childhood. Her parents weren't great, whatever. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep putting up with it. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. We had just had another one of those fights and I was done. I told her it was over. I didn't want to be in a relationship where I was constantly walking on eggshells. I thought we could go our separate ways, part amicably. I thought it would be a simple breakup, just like any other. It wasn't. The moment I said those words, I think we should break up, her face changed. It was like a switch flipped in her. She went from crying to angry to something else. I didn't know what to expect, and I wasn't expecting what happened next. She ran out of my apartment, and I figured she just needed space. I didn't think much of it. But that night, my bank account started blowing up. Notifications kept popping up on my phone. $500 spent at Macy's. $200 spent at Best Buy. My heart sank when I saw it. I checked my other accounts, and it was the same story. Charges coming in left and right. Who the hell was doing this? That's when I realized. Lena. She had stolen my credit cards. I didn't even know how she got them, but somehow she had access to every card I owned. I immediately tried to call her, but she didn't pick up. I sent a few texts, but no reply. I started to panic. There were thousands of dollars worth of purchases piling up, and I had no idea how to stop it. I called my bank, but they told me the damage had already been done. My cards were maxed out, and by the time they were flagged as fraudulent, it was too late. I couldn't believe it. Lana had been on a shopping spree, buying clothes, electronics, and whatever else caught her eye. She was racking up bills in my name, and I was stuck with the mess. It wasn't just the money. It was the sheer audacity of what she'd done. I was sitting there trying to wrap my head around it, and I just kept thinking, how could she do this? I didn't sleep that night. I spent the next few hours canceling all my cards, reporting fraudulent activity, and dealing with the fallout. I called the police, but they told me there wasn't much they could do unless she used the cards in person or there was a clear record of theft. In the meantime, Lena was out there living it up on my dime, and I had no idea where she was or what she was buying next. A couple of days passed, and I thought I was starting to get a grip on things. But then I got a call from my credit card company. They had tracked down one of the purchases Lana had made at a store downtown, and guess what? She had used my ID to buy a bunch of stuff. They had a security camera footage of her, and it was all over her face. I couldn't believe it. There she was, smiling in a store I had never been to, using my cards like it was no big deal. I gave the police all the information I had, including the footage. It didn't take long for them to track her down. Turns out she had been caught trying to buy even more things at a different store, and when the police confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. She had no explanation, no remorse. She just admitted to everything and was arrested on the spot. To make matters worse, I later found out she had been doing this to other guys before me. She had a habit of dating men, stealing their credit card info, and going on shopping sprees. I had no idea, and it made me sick to think I had been one of her victims. It was a mess. The bank worked with me to reverse most of the charges, but the whole thing left a permanent mark. My credit took a huge hit, and I had to deal with the stress of it all for months. As for Lana, well, she was sentenced to jail time for the thefts. I didn't feel bad for her. I felt angry. I had trusted her, and she completely destroyed that trust in the worst way possible. I haven't heard from her since. Every now and then, I'll hear stories about her through mutual friends, but I don't care anymore. She's in jail where she belongs, and I've moved on with my life, but the whole experience still haunts me. It's crazy how someone you trust can completely flip and turn into a person you barely recognize. I never expected to be taken advantage of like that, especially by someone I thought I loved. If there's one thing I've learned, it's to trust your instincts and always be careful about who you let into your life. People can hide their true colors for a long time, but eventually it all comes to light. I'm just glad she got caught, and I'll never make the mistake of trusting someone like that again. There's this one thing I'll never forget about my ex Nick that still gives me the creeps to this day. It's not the way he'd get jealous when I hung out with friends or the weird text he'd send at 3 in the morning asking where I was. No, the thing that freaks me out the most. The fact that Nick had this strange, almost obsessive thing with pets. And I don't mean like he loves dogs or he's got a cat, no. This was different. He had a thing for animals in a way that made me question his sanity. I didn't realize it at first, of course. When we first started dating, everything seemed normal enough. He was charming, funny, and honestly, he had a pretty good vibe. We'd hang out, watch movies, talk about everything under the sun. But slowly, things started getting off. Little things at first, like when we'd be on the phone, he casually mentioned his pets, but not in a regular way. It wasn't just like, I have a dog or I have a fish. He'd get too detailed about their habits, their behaviors, how they loved him. It seemed normal until it didn't. Then came the first red flag, the reptiles. At the time, I didn't think too much of it. He mentioned he had a pet snake, like cool, some people like them, right? I wasn't really a fan, but whatever. I had never even been near one, so it didn't freak me out that much. But then things got weird when he started sending me random pictures of him with a snake, hanging out in his room. He'd send me these weird selfies, the snake curled around his neck, its face right up next to his, like it was a pet cat or something. And he'd caption them things like, me and Spooky, having a chill day, or Spooky loves hanging out with me. That was the first time I got a bad feeling about his obsession with animals. I tried not to judge. People have their hobbies, right? But the longer we were together, the weirder it got. He started talking about getting more exotic pets. Things like tarantulas, canlins, and even a couple of birds that he swore were super rare. He'd go on about how intelligent and in touch these animals were. The way he talked about them, it was like they were his best friends, maybe even more than that. It wasn't normal, but again, I shrugged it off. I figured maybe he just really loved animals and this was his thing. But then one day I came over to his apartment, and that's when I found it. I had been over a couple of times before and had never seen anything super out of the ordinary, other than the cages and tanks in his living room. He had these glass tanks with different reptiles, but I thought that was just part of his collection. I figured he kept them in their own space, and I didn't pay much attention. But that day, I opened his wardrobe to grab a jacket I left behind, and there it was. A snake. A huge one coiled up on the top shelf of his wardrobe, just chilling there like it belonged. I was immediately grossed out and froze. What the hell was it doing there? The wardrobe was tiny, barely enough room for clothes, let alone a snake. And it wasn't in a tank. It was just hanging out on the shelf with no care in the world. I don't know why, but seeing it there, all coiled up and comfortable in a space that was clearly meant for my clothes, sent a weird chill down my spine. I slammed the door shut, heart racing, and just stood there in complete disbelief for a second. How did it get there? Why was it there? I wasn't even sure if I should tell him. My brain was trying to make sense of it, but all I could think was, this isn't right. When Nick came home a little later, I had to bring it up. I told him I found the snake, and he acted like it was no big deal. He just shrugged and said, oh, Spooky likes to hang out there sometimes. It's not a big deal. Like, not a big deal. Dude, there's a snake in my clothes. I didn't know what to say. I was pissed off, grossed out, and really just confused at that point. How could anyone think that was okay? Why would he let an animal, one that could be dangerous, roam freely in a space like that, especially when I was spending the night. I asked him to put it back in its tank, but he didn't seem to get it. He just seemed more interested in the fact that I was freaking out over it. That's when things took a turn. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more and more weird things. He had more animals than I realized, each with their own quirks. His apartment was like a mini zoo, but instead of a pet store, it felt like something out of a horror movie. There were cages stacked on top of each other, and some of the animals looked unhealthy. A tarantula in the corner with an almost glazed look in its eyes. A couple of channelings that never seemed to move. There was even a hamster running on a wheel in the living room, but it was so old it didn't move much anymore. I started to feel uncomfortable every time I went over there. It wasn't just the animals themselves. It was the way he talked about them. The way he'd say things like, "Spooky loves it when I give him attention," or "the birds and I have a bond you wouldn't understand." He didn't talk about people the way he talked about his pets. It was almost like he was more in tune with them than he was with anyone else, and that freaked me out. But I kept going. I didn't know how to break up with him. He seemed harmless, if a bit strange. But then came the night that sealed the deal for me. I came over to his place and saw him feeding his snake. But this time, something was different. He was talking to it. I don't know if I was just seeing things differently after everything that had been happening, but it honestly felt like he was having a conversation with the snake. He was leaning down to the tank, whispering to it like it was some kind of secret. I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I ended things. I told him that I couldn't deal with how obsessed he was with his animals and that I felt like I was just another pet to him. He didn't seem all that surprised. Maybe he was waiting for it to happen, but either way, it was over. And while I've moved on, I can't look at snakes, or any kind of exotic pet, the same way again. It's one of those things that never really leaves you. Every time I think back on it, I get a little unsettled. Sometimes I can't shake the thought of that snake in the wardrobe. I don't think he ever understood why it bothered me, but it wasn't just the snake. It was everything that came with it. The obsession, the weird control, the way he'd make everything else about his animals. The whole thing was just off. I'll never forget the day Santa crashed my car. It's not just the fact that she destroyed my brand new BMW M2 competition, a car I had worked my ass off for, or the fact that she tried to spin the whole thing around and blame me for it. It's that moment when I realized just how far she'd go to make me look like the bad guy. I wish I had seen the signs earlier, but sometimes you just don't realize how toxic someone can be until it's too late. We had been dating for about 6 months. Things were pretty good in the beginning. She was fun, charming, and seemed to have her life together. She was smart, well-spoken, and always knew how to make me laugh. I thought I had found someone special. But then little things started to slip through the cracks. I'll admit I was too blinded by the good times to notice at first. It's easy to ignore the warning signs when everything else seems perfect. Santa wasn't the best with money. I didn't mind helping her out occasionally, buying dinner or covering a bill here and there, but it wasn't long before it became a pattern. It wasn't just that she couldn't manage her finances, it was that she didn't seem to care. She'd get upset when I bring it up, acting like I was nagging her, like it was somehow my fault that she was always broke. I started to get frustrated, but I brushed it off. We all have our problems, right? Things started to take a darker turn when she got really possessive. She didn't like it when I hung out with friends, especially if it was just me and a couple of my buddies. I noticed her getting quieter, giving me the cold shoulder whenever I spent time with people outside of our relationship. It felt like I was walking on eggshells around her, always trying to make sure I didn't do something that would set her off. But the breaking point came when I bought my BMW M2 competition. I had been saving up for it for years, and when I finally got the keys in my hand, I was on cloud nine. This car wasn't just a dream for me, it was a symbol of all the hard work I put in. I was so proud of it. But Sana didn't see it that way. At first, she acted excited about it, like I could tell something was off. It was like she felt threatened by it, like it somehow took attention away from her. I should have seen the red flags then, but again, I didn't. Things came to a head one afternoon. I had invited her to hang out, just the two of us. I was showing off the car, explaining all the cool features and how it was such a big deal for me. I figured we could have a nice, chill day together, but as soon as she got in the passenger seat, the vibe shifted. She was quiet, almost sulking. I tried to talk to her, but she barely responded. It was like she was angry, and I couldn't figure out why. After a while, I decided to take her on a drive. Maybe the fresh air would clear her head. We headed out to some back roads, the ones that are empty and peaceful. But that peace didn't last long. Out of nowhere, Santa suddenly grabbed the wheel and yanked it to the side. The car jerked, tires screeching as we careened toward the trees. I didn't have time to react, and before I knew it, the car slammed into one of the thick trunks. Everything went black for a second. My head slammed against the headrest, and I felt a sharp pain shoot through my neck. When I came to, I realized we had stopped, the car now crumpled against the tree. I was in shock, trying to make sense of what just happened. My heart was racing, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I looked over at Santa. She wasn't hurt, just sitting there, looking almost too calm for someone who had just been in a car crash. I was too stunned to say anything at first. My mind was scrambling. Was this an accident? Did she do that on purpose? I couldn't get my thoughts straight. I checked myself for injuries and realized I was okay, just a little shaken up. But my car, my brand new BMW, it was totaled. The front end was wrecked, smoke rising from the engine. Santa finally turned to me, her face suddenly full of fake concern. She acted like the victim, like she was the one who had been hurt. But when she spoke, I realized what she was doing. She tried to blame me. She was telling me I was driving too fast, that I wasn't paying attention, that I caused the accident. She even suggested that I was the one who veered the wheel, even though she had been the one who grabbed it in the first place. I couldn't believe it. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything. Here I was in a wrecked car with a woman who had just crashed it on purpose, and she was turning it around to make it seem like it was my fault. The audacity. The complete lack of responsibility or self-awareness. I was furious, but I didn't know what to say. I got out of the car and immediately called my insurance company. Sana, however, was still trying to get me to calm down, insisting that I didn't need to report the accident. She kept saying it was a freak accident and that I should just tell the insurance company I was the one driving, that it was my fault. I couldn't believe how manipulative she was being. When the police arrived, Santa quickly spun her story. She told them I was the one who had crashed the car. She said I was driving recklessly and that I had lost control. My jaw dropped. I had never seen her like this before. She was lying through her teeth, and I was left standing there, speechless. I told the officer the truth, that it was Santa who grabbed the wheel. In the end, the officer couldn't really prove anything, but I knew what had happened. The car was totaled, my insurance premiums went up, and Santa just acted like nothing happened. She wasn't even sorry. She never admitted she did it on purpose, and over time, she started pretending like everything was fine, like nothing was wrong between us. But I knew the truth. I broke up with her a week later. It wasn't just about the car. It was about the way she manipulated the situation, how she tried to twist everything around to make me look like the bad guy. It took me a while to realize that Santa wasn't the person I thought she was. She was selfish, toxic, and dangerous in ways I never imagined. Now, every time I see a BMW 2 on the road, I get this pit in my stomach. It's not just a car. It's the reminder of how someone I loved tried to destroy everything I cared about. And that's something I'll never forget. I wish I could tell you this is one of those creepy ex stories where the guy just kept texting me or stalking me after we broke up. But nope, it's much weirder than that. I'm still processing how this even happened. I don't think I'll ever fully wrap my head around it. The worst part, I didn't find out until after we broke up. I know you're probably thinking, okay, this has to be a joke, but I swear on everything it's not. I wish it were. Ken and I met through some mutual friend at a party. He seemed normal at first, kind of quiet, but sweet and easy to talk to. He was one of those guys who wasn't trying too hard, and honestly, I liked that. Over time, we clicked, and eventually we started dating. Everything was good at the start. He was respectful, funny, and overall just, well, normal. Or so I thought. But there were little things, strange things that I started noticing as we got closer. He would always ask about my nails, how often I clipped them when I last did, if they were trimmed properly. It was weird, but I didn't think much of it. Some people have odd habits, right? But then one day after I clipped my toenails, Ken asked if he could keep them. At first, I just laughed it off, thinking he was joking. But no, he wasn't. He was serious. I told him no, obviously, but that didn't stop him from trying again the next time I clipped them. He got a little weird about it, like there was something wrong with me for not wanting to give them to him. It felt off, but he reassured me that it was just a quirky thing of his, nothing to worry about. I let it slide, mostly because I didn't want to make a big deal out of something that seemed so small. That was until things started getting stranger. He'd asked to take pictures of my toenails after I clipped them, saying it was because he loved how neat and perfect they were. And again, I was weirded out, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. So I let him take a few. It felt uncomfortable, like I was the one being weird for not wanting him to keep them. But eventually, I started putting my foot down. I told him I didn't want him keeping my toenail clippings, and he said he'd stop asking. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. About a month later, we broke up. It wasn't dramatic or anything, just one of those things where it felt like we had grown apart. We stayed friends for a while, or at least I thought we did. That's when I started getting strange messages from people I didn't know. Random people started following me on social media, sending me comments about my toenails. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but it didn't take long for me to realize something was really off. One day, I decided to Google my name. I know, don't do that, and I saw it. It was a listing on eBay, but it wasn't just any regular listing. It was a set of my toenail clippings. And it wasn't just any set of toenail clippings. These were advertised as holy toenails. My heart dropped. The listing described them as sacred, perfect toenail clippings from a woman whose feet possessed divine beauty. They were selling for hundreds of dollars, and the description talked about how these toenails had magical powers and were blessed by the gods. I felt like I was going to puke. This couldn't be real. This had to be some sick joke. I clicked through the other listings, and there it was. Ken had taken pictures of my toenails, pictures he'd taken when I'd let him, and posted them along with the clippings for sale. He was selling my toenail clippings as some kind of weird holy relic. I scrolled through his eBay profile and saw that he'd been selling them for months. There were dozens of posts, some of them labeled with descriptions like sacred toe clippings from the goddess of perfection and blessed toenails, a true relic for the faithful, and they were all mine. I was in disbelief. My ex was selling my toenails and people were buying them. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I didn't know what to do. It was like everything I thought I knew about him, about our relationship, was a lie. I called him, but of course he didn't answer. I started emailing eBay, trying to get the listings removed, but they told me there was nothing they could do unless I could prove they were my toenails. That was even more messed up. How do you prove that your toenail clippings are yours? How can I even prove something that ridiculous? After I finally tracked Ken down, he acted like it wasn't a big deal at all. He didn't even apologize. He just acted like I should be grateful that he kept them for posterity. When I asked him why the hell he thought this was okay, he shrugged and said that the people who bought them really appreciated the spiritual connection they had with them. Apparently, there was some online community of people who believed in collecting holy objects like this, and for some reason my toenail clippings were the holy grail. He made money off them too, thousands of dollars, and the whole time, he'd been telling people that I had no idea about it, that I was honored to be part of this divine collection. I was furious, disgusted, but more than anything, I felt violated. Those were my toenails, my personal body parts, and he turned them into some sick business venture. I tried to get him to stop, to take down the listings and destroy the clippings, but he just laughed it off. The worst part, he started selling them in bulk. He didn't even need my permission. He'd just take more toenails every time I visited him. I don't even know how many times this went on. Eventually, I had to take legal action. I didn't even know how to start. I didn't know how to explain to anyone that my ex was selling my toenail clippings online. It felt too bizarre, too insane. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. The aftermath was a mess. The media caught wind of the story, and it became this weird viral sensation. People started following Ken for his unique business. Some even offered to pay him for more toenail clippings. The whole thing spiraled out of control. Meanwhile, I just wanted to forget it, to pretend it never happened. But every time I looked at my feet, every time I clipped my toenails, I couldn't help but feel a wave of disgust. Ken eventually disappeared from the spotlight, and the whole thing slowly died down. But I'll never forget what happened. I don't think I'll ever look at a toenail clipper the same way again. It was supposed to be just another normal breakup. You know, the kind, awkward but civil. Two people realizing they're not right for each other, maybe a little emotional, but nothing that should have made me lose my mind. What I didn't expect was for the story to turn into a horror show one I couldn't wake up from. If you've ever been betrayed in a way that just makes you question everything you thought you knew, you'll get what I mean. And trust me, when I found all it is I had done, It felt like my entire world just imploded. Liz and I had been together for almost a year. It wasn't perfect, but nothing ever is. She was beautiful, outgoing, and had this charm that made everyone love her. My friends, my family, they all thought she was great. I was proud of her. But then the cracks started showing. She became distant, texting a lot, always on her phone, and I noticed she'd get defensive when I asked about her day. At first, I chalked it up to stress, maybe work issues, or just the normal ups and downs of a relationship. But I couldn't shake this gut feeling that something was off. It wasn't until one night, a couple of weeks after we'd started drifting apart, that I got the confirmation I wasn't ready for. I came home early from a night out with friends, thinking I'd surprise her. I was eager to work through the tension between us. But as I walked through the door, I heard muffled sounds coming from the living room. I thought maybe she was watching TV or talking to a friend. But then I saw it. There they were, sitting too close together on the couch, Liza and my dad. They didn't hear me at first, so I just stood there, frozen in the doorway, trying to process what I was seeing. My dad, the one who'd raised me, who'd always been the solid, dependable guy in my life, was laughing with her in a way I had never seen. A little too comfortably. It wasn't until I cleared my throat, that's when they'd both turned. And the look on Liz's face, God, I'll never forget it. She was pale, wide-eyed, like a deer caught in headlights. My dad just looked confused, like he wasn't sure what to say. That's when the truth hit me hard. I didn't need words to understand. The realization hit me like a slap to the face. It was obvious now in the way they looked at each other, in the way my dad nervously adjusted his shirt. Something was wrong, something deeply wrong. I didn't know what to do. I could barely breathe. Everything I had known, everything I thought I understood about my life was shattered in that moment. My dad and Liza. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved, was with him. She was with my dad. I don't remember much of what happened next. I think I said something, or maybe I just walked away, but I definitely didn't stick around for an explanation. I couldn't look at either of them. I just ran. I went to my car and drove. No destination. Just driving, trying to outrun the images in my head. But the more I thought about it, the more disgusted I felt. How could this happen? How could she do this? How could my dad betray me like that? I kept thinking it was a nightmare, that I'd wake up and everything would be fine. But when the phone buzzed in my pocket, I knew it was real. It was a message from Liza. I'm sorry, I don't know how this happened, but it's not what you think. That was it. No explanation, no apology. Just a text that made me feel even worse. It made my stomach twist. I didn't speak to her for days. I blocked her on everything, text, social media, you name it. But no matter how many times I blocked her number, I kept getting messages from different accounts or calls from private numbers. She couldn't leave it alone. Neither could my dad. What made it worse was when I found out the details. Liza and my dad hadn't just gotten together once. It had been going on for months. I couldn't even look at my dad the same way after that. He tried to apologize, but there was nothing he could say that would make this okay. He said it was a mistake, that he never meant to hurt me, but it didn't matter. Nothing could take away the image of them together. It felt like my whole family was a lie. For the next couple of weeks, I was a ghost. I barely went to work, barely talked to my friends. Every time I saw a message from Liza, I'd get this sick feeling in my stomach, like I was being suffocated. I didn't know I wanted more answers or to just forget the whole thing ever happened. But every time I thought I could forget, something new would come up. I found out through mutual friends that Liza was trying to justify everything to them. She painted herself as the victim. She said she was confused and didn't mean for it to happen. She even tried to spin it like she was just looking for comfort and that my dad had been there for her when she needed someone. It made me sick. I wasn't sure if she was lying to make herself feel better or if she truly believed the nonsense she was saying. Either way, it didn't matter. She had done something unforgivable, and she was still playing the victim. The worst part, the thing that really destroyed me, was when I found out she hadn't just cheated on me with my dad. No, she had been seeing other guys too. Guys she'd met through mutual friends, people she knew I trusted. It was like she was deliberately trying to make me feel like I meant nothing to her. I wasn't just betrayed once. I was betrayed on every level. I couldn't get the images of them out of my head. The idea of my dad, being with Eliza made me question everything. I couldn't be around either of them. Every time I saw my dad, I felt this wave of anger and disgust wash over me. I couldn't even look at him without thinking of what he'd done. I didn't want to forgive him. I didn't want to pretend like everything was okay. And Liza, she was dead to me. I couldn't fathom why I ever trusted her. The woman I had loved, the woman I had planned a future with, had done this to me. The hardest part of it all wasn't even the anger. It was the heartbreak, the realization that the people you loved, the people you thought would always have your back, were capable of hurting you in ways you couldn't even imagine. And now here I am, months later, still trying to piece myself back together. I don't know if I'll ever fully get over it. But I do know this. I'll never let myself be that vulnerable again. I don't care how charming someone is. No one gets to break me like that twice. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to have a crazy ex, but Adam proved me wrong. It all started so normally, dating, laughing, hanging out. I didn't know then that I was already walking into a storm. It wasn't until after the breakup that I realized how dark things could get when someone wants to destroy your life. And trust me, Adam did it with a level of spite that felt unreal. If you've ever been humiliated in front of people you barely know, you'll understand how hard it is to get your footing back. What I didn't expect was that it wouldn't just be a breakup, it would be a nightmare. We had been dating for almost 6 months when things started to go south. It wasn't a huge explosive fight that caused the breakup. It was more like a slow unraveling. Adam started acting distant and was getting frustrated. He'd be on his phone constantly, and when I tried to talk to him about it, he'd just brush it off. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was just a phase, that maybe we both just needed a little space. But things kept getting colder and colder between us, and then one day, he just ended it. It wasn't the breakup that got to me. It was what happened afterward. At first, I tried to handle it naturally. I posted some vague quotes on social media about moving on and starting fresh. It's not like I was heartbroken, but it was still a rough patch, and I knew it would take time to get over. A few days later, I started noticing that my friends were acting weird around me. It was small at first. People would glance at me awkwardly when they thought I wasn't looking, or the conversations would shift to something else as soon as I entered a room. It took me a while to figure out what was going on, but then it hit me. Someone was talking about me, a lot, and not in a good way. I logged onto my social media to find that Adam had posted something about me, something completely false. He posted a message on his profile that said I was unhygienic, and that he broke up with me because I smelled like fish. The post didn't just sit on his feed, he shared it in a few private groups too. It spread like wildfire, and it didn't take long for it to hit my friends and family. I tried to reach out to him, but of course he ignored me. I wasn't prepared for how quickly this would blow up. Suddenly, I was the target of ridicule, not just from people I barely knew, but people who were supposed to be my friends. My own mom even called me, asking if everything was okay, if I was really that dirty. I was in shock. It didn't make any sense. Adam had been the one to break up with me. He had been the one who distanced himself first. But now he was out there publicly saying I was some sort of disgusting, unhygienic freak. I never saw it coming. I mean, I know breakups can get ugly, but this was next level. The worst part was that the rumor wasn't even based on anything real. I had no idea why he'd say something so awful. I took care of myself. I was a normal 22-year-old woman. I went to the gym, showered regularly, wore clean clothes. I had no fishy smell. But once something like that gets out there, the damage is done. No matter how many times I tried to explain the truth, people just shrugged it off. Well, Adam seems like a good guy, they'd say. Maybe there's some truth to it. People I thought I could trust started pulling away from me, saying things like, well, we don't want to get involved in drama. It felt like everyone I knew was picking Adam's side without even thinking twice. The worst part was the public shame. It wasn't just my friends or family anymore. It was strangers too. People would whisper when they saw me, and some even made snide comments when they thought I wasn't listening. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't run away from the whispers, the looks, the online attacks. It didn't stop there. Adam got more bold. Every few weeks, he'd post something new about me. It would be a picture of a fish, tagged with something like, #still think she smells like this. He'd write these twisted little captions making me look like some sort of social pariah. But the worst part was that it wasn't just online anymore. I started getting weird messages from strangers. Some of them were supportive, but most were insulting. One person even sent me a picture of a rotting fish, saying I should take a hint. The paranoia was real. I didn't want to leave my house. I didn't want to show my face in public because everywhere I went, it felt like people knew. One day, I was at the grocery store, just trying to get some food when I overheard two people talking about me. They were standing in the aisle right next to me, completely unaware that I could hear every word. "Did you hear about the girl Adam used to date?" one of them said. "Yeah, I say she smells like fish. I saw her at the gym the other day." "Gross." The other person laughed. "Yeah, I heard she had to move to a different town to escape the rumors. She totally deserves it." I wanted to cry. It felt like the whole world had turned against me. I knew Adam was doing this on purpose. He had no reason for it, no motive other than to destroy me. He knew that spreading a rumor like that would stick. He knew that once the scent of a dirty girl was out there, it would follow me forever. I tried contacting the authorities, but without physical evidence of harassment. They said there wasn't much they could do. It wasn't illegal to spread rumors, no matter how damaging they were. The truth didn't matter anymore. Over time, it felt like my life was slipping through my fingers. The humiliation was relentless, and I felt like there was nothing I could do to stop it. I couldn't erase the pictures or the comments. I couldn't scrub away the memories of those whispers. And the worst part was, Adam wasn't stopping. I don't know what kind of sick satisfaction he got from seeing me suffer, but he was relentless. Eventually, I had to leave town. I couldn't live like that anymore. It's strange how a breakup, something that should be so simple, can completely ruin your life when someone decides to twist the truth. It's been over a year now, and I've tried to rebuild. But no matter where I go, I'll always have that feeling, that stay on me that I didn't deserve. What's worse is that no matter how far I move or how many new people I meet, Adam's shadow is still there, lurking in the background, waiting to remind me of the lies he told. I never thought it would come to this. The kind of thing you hear about and think, that could never happen to me. You know the kind of story. Someone's ex starts acting crazy, and it escalates into some real-life horror. You laugh it off, brush it aside, but when it happens to you, it's a whole different story. Trust me, it's not something you want to be part of. Not by a long shot. It started with Shirley. I wouldn't call it love at first sight, but she definitely made an impression. We met at a party. She was loud, brash, and didn't take any shit from anyone. At first, that was kind of exciting. But as we spent more time together, I started to notice things. Stuff that didn't quite sit right. Little red flags. She was possessive, always checking my phone, making sure I wasn't talking to anyone else. You know, the usual signs that someone's got a little too much time on their hands. But I ignored it. It was fun, and I was caught up in the excitement of it all. Then came the breakup. It wasn't even dramatic. We just grew apart, I guess. I'm not going to lie, I was relieved. Things had gotten so tense that I was counting the days until I could finally breathe again. I thought it would be easy. One conversation, a little awkwardness, and then we'd move on. No big deal. But Shirley didn't get the memo. The first sign that things weren't going to be as smooth as I'd hoped happened a few days after the breakup. I was sitting in my living room, just zoning out on my phone when I heard a noise outside. A loud thud. I thought it was probably some kids messing around, but when I opened the front door to check, there was a water bottle lying on the ground, just sitting there in the middle of the yard like it had been thrown. Weird, but I figured it was a one-off. The next day it happened again. This time it was a rock, a pretty decent-sized one. It hit the side of my house with a solid thump. I went outside, but there was nothing. No one. Just the rock sitting there like it was some kind of message. I didn't think much of it then. People have weird ways of getting their feelings out right, but the next few days, that's when it started getting really strange. Every day, without fail, there'd be something outside my house. A bottle, a rock, a piece of garbage. I even found a dirty sock one time. At first, I'd go out and throw them away. No big deal, right? Just some odd behavior I could brush off. But soon, it started to feel like a game. The items got bigger, weirder. A shovel, a broken lamp. The kind of stuff that made you wonder how far someone was willing to go to get your attention. And then came the window. I was sitting on the couch late one night watching TV when I heard the sound of something shattering. I froze for a second, then ran to the front door to see what happened. My heart dropped when I saw it, a huge crack in the glass of my living room window. Someone had thrown something hard at it. I could only think of one person. Shirley? I had no proof, but who else would it be? I wasn't even sure what to do. Call the cops? Confront her? But I was scared. Scared that if I did, it would escalate, and I didn't know how much further I wanted to go down this rabbit hole. The next few days were like living in a nightmare. Every time I left the house, I'd come back to find something waiting for me. One day it was a broken flower pot. Another time it was a bag of flowers spread all over my front steps like some sort of weird ritual. And always, always, I had that feeling that someone was watching me. I'd hear footsteps outside at night, faint, but unmistakable. I checked the windows, but there was never anyone there. I tried to get in touch with Shirley a few times, but she wouldn't answer. She blocked me on everything, my phone, social media, you name it. That's when I realized this wasn't just some weird phase. She wasn't trying to get me back. She was trying to break me, to mess with my head, to make me feel like I couldn't escape. It wasn't until one night when I came home from work that things took a real turn. I opened the door, and there was the smell of something burning. The inside of my house didn't look any different, but the smell was thick, like something was still smoldering. I rushed inside, panicked, and looked around. Nothing seemed out of place, but the smell, it wasn't going away. That's when I saw it, an old t-shirt of mine, one I'd forgotten about, sitting on the floor next to a half-burned candle. Someone had tried to set it on fire. I called the cops after that. I was done playing games. I needed this to stop before things got worse, but by the time they arrived, there was nothing. No sign of Shirley, no evidence of anyone being around. They told me it was probably some sort of prank, maybe a stalker, but they couldn't do anything unless there was actual proof. For a while after that, I thought maybe I'd gotten lucky. Maybe she'd finally gotten bored, moved on to something else. But then one evening when I was heading out to grab dinner, I'd noticed something on my front porch. It was wrapped in a plastic bag, tied up tight. I felt my stomach drop as I reached down to grab it. Inside was a doll. A twisted, mangled doll that looked like it had been ripped apart and put back together by someone who clearly had no idea how to do it properly. The eyes were missing, the limbs were hanging off at weird angles, and the hair had been singed at the ends. I don't know what she was trying to say with that doll, but it was clear to me she wasn't done. And worse, she was escalating. At this point, I was scared. I didn't know what to expect next. Every night, I'd double-check the locks, make sure every window was shut tight, but I could still feel her presence, like she was always there, just out of sight, waiting. The idea that she was out there lurking in the dark, haunting my every step, it was enough to make me want to leave town, to drop everything and go. But I couldn't, because no matter where I went, I'd know she'd be waiting. I honestly didn't think I'd ever be in a situation like this. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and Anna, my ex-wife, was one of those curveballs that I couldn't dodge. When we first split, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Don't get me wrong, we had 2 kids, and I always knew they would be the priority. But after years of barely getting by, arguing, and watching her spiral out of control, I was just done. I had tried everything to make it work, but eventually it became clear that Anna wasn't the same woman I had once married. She had completely lost herself, and with that, she wasn't fit to be a mother anymore. I don't say that lightly. Anna wasn't abusive or anything like that, but she had a lot of issues. She wasn't consistent with her parenting. She couldn't keep a job, never followed through on commitments, and seemed to have this weird, reckless attitude towards life. And that reckless attitude carried over to the kids. There were nights when I'd get calls from her saying she was too tired to pick up our daughter from school or to make sure our son did his homework. I'd step in as I always did because I knew my kids were relying on me to be the stable one. The thing is, I don't think Anna ever saw the problem. She wasn't self-aware enough to realize how out of control things had gotten. I didn't want to be the one to take the kids away from her, but I started to worry more and more about their safety. She was selfish. She was neglectful, and it started getting worse. When the breakup happened, Anna wasn't too upset about it. In fact, she seemed oddly relieved. She went off on her own for a while, doing whatever she wanted, while I took over the day-to-day life with our kids. I didn't mind, honestly. My kids needed stability, and I was there to provide it. That's when things got, well, weird. A few months after we broke up, Anna started showing up at my house unannounced. Sometimes she'd knock, and other times she'd just stand outside, staring at my place. I thought she was trying to make sure I was doing okay, that we were all moving on, but it started getting creepy. She'd always come by at strange hours, like late at night or early in the morning. I didn't mind at first, but I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable with it, especially when she started trying to tell me how I should raise the kids. It was like she didn't even realize she was the one who had failed them in the first place. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got served papers. Anna was trying to get full custody of the kids. No warning, no conversation. Just legal papers dropped on my doorstep. It didn't make sense. Not at first. How could she even think she had a shot at that? I mean, I was the one who was actually there for our kids, day in and day out. But Anna wasn't backing down. She had hired a lawyer and was pushing for custody, claiming I was an unfit parent, and that I wasn't giving her a fair shot at raising the kids. I didn't know what to do. I had never been through something like this before. All of a sudden, I found myself fighting not only to stay in my kids' lives, but to prove that I was a better parent than she was. I had to dig into all the details of our past, the time she had left the kids alone, the time she had lied to me about her whereabouts, the nights when she'd been out partying instead of being home with them. There were a lot of things that didn't add up, but I was worried I wouldn't have enough to prove that she was unfit. I called my lawyer right away and we started collecting evidence. But the thing is, the longer this dragged on, the more I realized how far Anna was willing to go. She wasn't just trying to get the kids because she thought she was a good mother. She was doing this because she wanted control. She wanted to hurt me. And in some sick way, she thought that if she had the kids, she could hold something over my head. She kept telling everyone, our mutual friends, family, even neighbors, that I was the one who had abandoned the family, that I was the one who had messed up. And she painted herself as this victim, saying that I was keeping the kids from her for no reason. The worst part was that people started to believe her. I started getting weird looks when I went out in public. People would whisper when I was around, as if I was some kind of terrible father who didn't deserve my own kids. I couldn't let her win. I refused to let her drag me down like that. But it was starting to feel like I was in a battle I couldn't win. Every step I took to fight for my kids, she fought harder. She was manipulative. She twisted every little thing I did into something bad, even when I was just trying to be a good father. The court dates were the worst. Every time I walked in there, I felt like I was walking into a nightmare. I had to relive everything that went wrong in our relationship, everything that went wrong with the kids. And the worst part, Anna was sitting there acting like she had done nothing wrong, like she had been the best mom in the world. I knew I was in the right, but sometimes I started to wonder if I could actually prove it. But in the end, the truth came out. My lawyer did an incredible job of piecing everything together. The judge looked at all the evidence, all the lies, and all the things Anna had done that were unfit for a mother, and they gave me full custody of the kids. Anna didn't even get visitation rights. It wasn't just the worst thing she'd ever done. It was the most twisted, manipulative thing she could have done. And it left me feeling like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for her to pop back up with something even worse. But that's the thing about people like Anna. They don't care about anything except themselves. They'll do whatever it takes to hurt you, even if it means damaging the lives of the people they supposedly care about. I'm just glad I can finally move on. The kids are doing better, and I'm finally able to breathe without worrying that Anna will come back and try to tear our family apart. But I'll never forget what she did, and I'll never trust someone like her again. I didn't see it coming, not at all. Looking back, it's almost like everything should have been obvious, but I was too busy in my own head, too caught up in the moment to see what was happening right in front of me. I thought I had everything together, thought I had a solid relationship with Alicia. But what I found out turned my world upside down, and honestly, I'm still not sure how to process it all. Alicia was one of those girls who always seemed like she was living her best life. She was confident, outgoing, the life of the party. People loved being around her, and yeah, I'll admit I was proud to have her as my girlfriend. She was beautiful, funny, and had this way of making everyone feel special, like you were the only person in the room. But there were little things about her that I started noticing over time, things that didn't sit right with me. It started with the compliments. She would always say that my friends were hot, or that one of them had a great body or a killer smile. At first, I brushed it off as just for being playful or joking. It didn't really bother me. I figured it was just a harmless comment. After all, I trusted her. We'd been together for 2 years at that point. But as time went on, the comments started to get more frequent. She'd say things like, "If I wasn't with you, I'd totally go for him," or "I can't believe how good looking your friends are." I should have said something then, but I didn't. I told myself it was just a phase, or maybe I was just overthinking it. But then things started happening. Little things at first, like when she'd randomly text me saying she was hanging out with my friends without telling me beforehand. I'd ask her where she was, and she'd mention one of my friends in passing like it was no big deal. I remember feeling a little off about it, but I never said anything. I mean, what was I going to do? Accuse her of cheating without any proof? That didn't seem right. Eventually, she started making more comments that made me uncomfortable. She'd joke about how one of my friends was a better kisser, or how another one was way more adventurous than I was. Again, I didn't say anything. I should have, but I didn't want to sound insecure or paranoid. That's the thing about being in a relationship. You trust your partner. You trust them with everything. And when they start making you question your instincts, you don't always know how to react. But then came the day I found out. It was one of those random days when everything falls into place, and the truth comes crashing down all at once. I was at home one afternoon just browsing through my phone when a message from one of my friends popped up. It was Ben. He and I had been friends for years, and he was one of the guys I thought I could always count on. But this message, it changed everything. The text was simple at first. Hey man, we need to talk. At first, I figured it was just some random thing, maybe a dumb inside joke. But then Ben said, I didn't want to say anything, but I think you need to know. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the way he said it made my heart sink. I told him I was free to talk, and within minutes we were on the phone. That's when he dropped the bomb. He told me that he had slept with Alicia. He said it happened a few months ago when I was out of town for work. He didn't go into details, but the way he spoke, I could tell he was feeling guilty. The whole thing hit me like a truck. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to say. Ben wasn't the only one. As the days went on, I started hearing from other guys. It wasn't just Ben. She had slept with every single one of my closest friends. Every single one. Over the course of our 2-year relationship, Alicia had been having affairs with all 6 of them. Each one of them came forward, and I was left in complete disbelief. I couldn't even process what I was hearing. How could she do this? How could she betray me in such a messed up way? She was with me the whole time, pretending like everything was fine, all while hooking up with my friends behind my back. And it wasn't like it was a one-time thing. She'd been doing this for months, sneaking around, playing me for a fool. My mind couldn't comprehend how this had all been happening without me noticing. All little comments, the late nights, the random hangouts, it had all been part of this twisted game. They weren't just casual flings. They were serious, long-term affairs that she had kept hidden from me, even while I thought we were in a committed relationship. What messed me up even more was how she acted afterward. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. She didn't apologize either. Instead, she got defensive, like I was the one in the wrong for even being upset. She said things like, "It's not that big of a deal," or "You should have seen it coming." She acted like it was all just part of the process, like I was supposed to accept it. The worst part, she didn't even seem to care that I was hurt. It was like she had no empathy for what she had done to me or our relationship. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. Not only had she cheated on me with my friends, but she had no remorse. It was like it was just some kind of joke to her. I cut her off completely after that. I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick. The worst part of it all was that I had let it go on for so long. I had trusted her. I had let her manipulate me into thinking I was a problem when all along, she was the one lying, deceiving, and playing me. Now, I'm still dealing with the aftermath. I don't talk to my friends anymore. How could I? I can't look at them the same way. And as for Alicia, I can't even imagine what would make her act the way she did. It's like she wasn't even a real person, just a character in a twisted drama she had created. And I was the last one to find out. I'm not sure what hurts more, the fact that she betrayed me, or the fact that I let it happen for so long. But one thing's for sure, I'll never let someone like that into my life again. I'll never forget the way my world came crashing down when Austin, my ex, decided to make my life a living nightmare. It wasn't enough that he dumped me, but the way he went about it. It was insane. It didn't even make sense at first, and I still can't wrap my head around it. I guess it started with a simple breakup, or so I thought. But what followed was a twisted revenge plot that somehow, in the end, turned into something I could never have seen coming. We'd been together for about a year. Honestly, everything seemed perfect. At least I thought it was. Austin was charming, funny, and treated me like I was the most important person in the world. We went on trips, spent nights out, and shared everything. Or so I thought. One day, out of nowhere, he broke up with me. He said he didn't feel the spark anymore, that things weren't the same. I tried to understand, but deep down I knew it was more than that. The hardest part wasn't just losing him, though. It was how quickly he moved on. At first, I didn't think much of it, figured he was just trying to get over things. But when I found out he was dating my best friend, Sarah, that's when things started to go south fast. It didn't hit you right away. Sarah and I had been friends for years and we'd always been close. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could Austin, the guy who had just broken up with me, end up dating the one person I trusted the most? I asked myself a million times if I was overreacting. But every time I saw them together, whether it was online or in person, it felt like a punch to the gut. The thing that made it even worse was the way they acted. It wasn't like a casual fling. They were serious about it. I remember seeing pictures of them holding hands, laughing, and spending time together in places that had once been our spots. Sarah had even started wearing a necklace I'd given Austin for our anniversary. I'm not exaggerating when I say it felt like a personal betrayal on top of everything else. And that wasn't even the worst part. What truly messed with me was the way Austin acted like everything was perfectly fine. It was like he had no remorse, like he wasn't tearing apart the one thing that had been a constant in my life. I never got a real explanation from him. Not that it mattered at that point. He didn't care about me anymore, and he was too busy showing off his new relationship with Sarah to even think about how it made me feel. I tried to keep my distance. I did everything I could to avoid them, stopped hanging out with mutual friends, blocked them on social media, and even took time off work to clear my head. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that this whole situation wasn't just about a simple breakup. Austin had an agenda, and I was too blind to see it until later. Months passed, and I heard little whispers here and there about how serious they were. Sarah and Austin were planning a trip together, and I couldn't handle the thought of it. I still couldn't fathom how they could go from my best friend and my ex to whatever this was. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a phase. I'd get over it, I'd move on, and eventually it would all stop bothering me. But then came the wedding invitation. When I got the invite to their wedding, I almost threw up. I couldn't believe it. They'd actually gone that far, gotten engaged, planned a whole wedding. I had no idea they were even that serious, let alone planning to get married. It felt like a slap in the face. I was invited, of course, but there was no way I was going. How could I possibly sit through a ceremony where my ex and best friend were getting married? It was too much. The worst part wasn't just that they were getting married. It was that, deep down, I knew it was all part of Austin's revenge plan. He didn't just want to move on with someone else. He wanted to rub it in my face that he had taken everything from me. He had stolen my best friend, my trust, and now my place in their lives. And Sarah? She didn't even seem to care about how badly she'd hurt me. It was like she was completely okay with everything that had happened, as if our friendship had never meant anything to her. I didn't go to the wedding. I couldn't. But seeing the photos online afterward, it was a whole new level of painful. Sarah looked so happy in every picture in Austin. He had this smug look on his face, like he won some kind of sick game. I spent the next few days in a haze trying to process what had happened. I had thought I knew who they both were, but now I didn't recognize them. Months passed and I tried my best to move on. I met new people, focused on my career, and slowly got back into the swing of things. I thought I had put the whole Austin and Sarah situation behind me. But then, about a year later, I saw them again. This time, it wasn't on social media. I ran into them at a cafe. They were sitting together just like old times. But this time, they were holding hands and Sarah was wearing a wedding ring. It was like a punch to the stomach. They were happily married now, living their lives, and I was just some distant memory. I didn't even feel anger anymore. Just this deep, gnawing emptiness. How had I gotten to this point? How had they gotten away with everything? The truth is, it's hard to walk away from something you thought was love. And even harder when the people you trust betray you in the worst way possible. I'm not angry anymore, though. I've accepted that what they did isn't something I can control. They made their choices, and I'm better off without them. But it still stings, and I can't help but feel like I'll never fully get over it. They got their happy ending, and I'm just here, trying to make sense of a relationship and a friendship that was never really mine to begin with. The hardest part. The one thing that still messes with me. I'll never understand how things ended up this way. I still can't wrap my head around what happened. If someone had told me this story a few months ago, I would have laughed in their face. But now it's my reality. Harry, my ex, the guy I thought I was falling for, turns out he was obsessed with my mother, and not in a healthy way. It all started like any normal relationship. We met at work, and Harry was charming. Funny, good-looking, it always made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He knew the right things to say and had that kind of charisma that made you want to spend all your time around him. We started hanging out more, going on dates, and eventually it turned into a full-blown relationship. At least that's what I thought. I'm the type of person who trusts easily, probably too easily. I had never had the chance to be in a relationship like this before. Sure, there were minor red flags, like how possessive he could be when it came to me, but I shrugged it off. He was just really into me, right? But then things started getting a little It wasn't anything huge at first, just small things. Like when we would hang out at my apartment, he'd always ask about my mom. How's she doing? What's she been up to? Stuff like that. I thought it was cute. My mom and I are close, so I figured he was just being polite. But it started to happen more and more. He'd even text me to ask if I was hanging out with her or if I could invite her over when I had a dinner party. Little things, but still, it didn't sit right with me. But the real turning point came one weekend when I invited him to my parents' house for dinner. It was supposed to be a casual thing, just a way to get the two worlds I cared about to meet. But the way he acted around my mom, it was unsettling. He complimented her constantly, more than you would expect. At first, I brushed it off, but the way he looked at her was different. There was something strange behind his eyes, something I couldn't put my finger on. It wasn't the look of someone admiring a woman's beauty, it was something darker. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I noticed Harry wasn't around. I went looking for him and found him standing in the hallway, staring at a picture of my mom on the wall. He didn't even hear me approach. It was like he was in some sort of trance. I didn't say anything. I just walked away, hoping I was imagining things. The next few days felt normal, but that night left a bad taste in my mouth. So I started paying closer attention to his behavior, and I started noticing more things that didn't add up. He'd bring up my mom all the time, how she dressed, how she talked, even little details like the way she laughed. He started showing up at my house with gifts for her, like a bouquet of flowers or some random trinket he thought she might like. I started to get this horrible gut feeling like I was being played. It all came to a head and I decided to surprise him by showing up at his apartment unannounced one evening. I figured I'd catch him off guard, keep things spontaneous. But when I walked in, my heart dropped in my stomach. His place was covered in photos, but not of us. Not of me and him like I had expected. No, his walls were covered in pictures of my mom. Pictures she'd never even seen before. They were from different stages of her life, photos she had never given to anyone. And they weren't just casual shots either. There were ones of her at events she had no idea he had attended. And there were even random candid shots of her in public, just walking around, smiling, living her life. I froze. My mind raced trying to process what I was seeing, and then I found it. In the back corner of his room, almost hidden beneath a pile of clothes, was something that made my blood run cold. A small shrine. There were candles, flowers, and more pictures of my mom. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie. It wasn't just admiration. It was obsession. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I felt like I was in some sort of nightmare that I couldn't escape. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. I left his place and I didn't go back for a week. But in that time, I started piecing things together. All those times he had tried to be extra nice to my mom. All those times he tried to get close to her. It wasn't just because he liked her as a person. He wanted her. And the worst part was, I didn't even know if he ever cared about me. When I finally gathered the courage to confront him, I went back to his apartment. He wasn't surprised to see me, which freaked me out even more. It was like he was waiting for me to show up. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there staring at the shrine, trying to understand how I hadn't seen this sooner. He came over to me trying to act calm, like none of this was a big deal. But I could see the desperation in his eyes. And that's when he told me the truth. He hadn't dated me because he wanted a relationship. He had dated me to get closer to my mom. Everything had been a game to him. All of it. I was just a stepping stone. He admitted he'd been obsessed with her for years and that he had been using me to get close to her. It was like the world around me crumbled in an instant. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just wanted to get out of there. I didn't waste another second. I left his place and I didn't look back. I blocked him on everything. Social media, phone, everything. I told my mom what happened, but honestly, I couldn't even talk about it for long. I just felt sick to my stomach. I can't understand what kind of person Harry really was. I still get chills thinking about the shrine, about how far he was willing to go just to be close to my mom. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't found out, but I'm glad I did. Sometimes you think you know someone, and then they pull something like this on you. It's not just creepy, it's downright terrifying. I honestly don't even know where to begin with this one, but trust me, it's not a story you'll hear every day. I met AJ when I was just getting out of a messy situation, and I thought he was this sweet, down-to-earth guy who would help me get back on my feet. Turns out he was anything but that. We started dating when I was in my early 20s. He was charming, funny, and always had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room. We didn't rush into things, so it felt pretty chill at first. Everything seemed normal in the beginning. He had a job, I had a job, and we were just two people figuring it out. But then things started to change. At first, it was small stuff. He'd ask me to help out with gas or dinner here and there, but I didn't think much of it. Relationships are about sharing, right? We had a mutual understanding, or so I thought. But over time, those little requests turned into something else. Eventually, it wasn't just dinners or gas. He started asking me to help pay his rent. It wasn't like he was between jobs or going through some rough patch. I was paying for everything: rent, food, bills, you name it. And every time he'd ask for something, I'd feel guilty saying no. He'd make me feel like it was just part of the relationship, that helping each other out was a given. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Here's the thing, though. AJ never had a solid job. He bounced between part-time gigs and side hustles that barely covered the basics, and somehow, I was the one left picking up the slack. I started feeling like a parent, not a girlfriend. I'd wake up early to go to work, come home after a long day, and there he'd be, chilling on the couch, playing video games or scrolling through his phone. And then it was time for another one of those "can you help me out" conversations. I wasn't the richest person, and I wasn't exactly living large, but I was making it work. I just didn't understand why he couldn't do the same. The rent payments started to pile up, and I couldn't make ends meet without stretching myself thin. But AJ always had this way of making me feel like I was just being dramatic. You knew what you were getting into, he'd say. We're in this together. But we weren't in this together. It was me carrying the weight of everything while he coasted along, doing just enough to seem like he was contributing. Over time, I started keeping track of everything I paid for. I keep a mental tally: rent, utilities, groceries, his phone bills, even the little things like gas money. And it added up fast. I don't think I realized how deep into it I was until I sat down one night and did the math. It wasn't just a few $100 here and there. I'd been paying for nearly everything in his life for the better part of 2 years. The rent alone was over $1,000 a month, not to mention the other stuff. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I don't think AJ ever fully grasped the reality of the situation. He'd ask for more and more, and I'd give it to him because I thought that's what you did in a relationship. He made me feel like I owed him, like it was my responsibility to support him. Every time I tried to talk about it, he'd turn it around on me. "You're not being supportive enough," he'd say. "You don't love me if you're not willing to help me out." And every time I'd feel this weird guilt, like I wasn't doing enough. He had this way of twisting my mind, making me question if I was being selfish for not wanting to foot the bill for everything. It wasn't just the money that started to eat away at me. The emotional toll was way worse. There were days when I'd come home after working an exhausting shift, only to be met with complaints about how I wasn't spending enough time with him, or how I was too busy to help him figure out how to get by. I started losing myself in the relationship. I wasn't allowed to have my own space, my own time. It felt like I was just his personal bank account, his maid, and his therapist all rolled into one. But no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. AJ always needed more. He'd ask for more money, more attention, more support. And every time I gave, it just felt like it was slipping through my fingers. It wasn't until I started getting that sinking feeling in my stomach that something wasn't right that I started looking at things more closely. The more I looked, the more I realized I had been enabling him. I had been caught up in the cycle of guilt, where I felt responsible for his happiness, his financial stability, and his emotional well-being. One night, after yet another "can you pay this bill" conversation, I broke down. I finally told him I needed space, that I couldn't keep doing it anymore. He didn't get it. He didn't understand why I was upset. And that's when I realized just how far he had gone. He had convinced me that I wasn't doing enough, that it was my responsibility to support him no matter what. I wasn't even in a relationship anymore. I was his caretaker, his ATM, and his emotional crutch all at once. Eventually, I made the decision to end things, but even then it wasn't simple. AJ didn't want to let go. He would text, call, show up at my place trying to convince me that I was making a mistake. I could see the desperation in his eyes. He was losing his source of income, and he didn't know how to handle it. He would guilt trip me into feeling bad for him, making me think that I was abandoning him when he needed me the most. But I had to cut him out of my life for good. He wasn't going to change, and I was just a stepping stone for him to keep moving forward. It's crazy to think that I let things go on for so long that I was too blind to see what was really happening. AJ wasn't the guy I thought he was. In the end, I had to learn the hard way that sometimes love doesn't mean you sacrifice everything for someone who doesn't appreciate it. This story still gives me chills when I think about it. I don't even know where to start, but let's just say that sometimes life takes a turn in ways you never expect, and you don't always see the signs until it's too late. I used to date Chloe. We met at work, super casual, nothing out of the ordinary at first. She was friendly, funny, and we hit it off pretty quickly. We'd grab coffee together during breaks, chat out whatever was going on at the office, and spend time together outside of work. It wasn't anything serious, but it felt easy. You know, that kind of connection where it just makes sense. That was us. I'm not going to sit here and say I was perfect. We had our problems, sure. There were misunderstandings and we argued a few times, but nothing that seemed too big to handle. Things got tricky when we started getting closer, though. Chloe was one of those people who always wanted to be the center of attention. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being confident. But she always pushed the boundaries, and I started to notice she didn't like when I didn't give her the attention she wanted. I thought maybe it was just the nature of our relationship, but it started getting worse. We'd be at work, and I'd hear her talking to people about personal stuff, stuff that should have stayed between us. There were little things that bugged me, like she'd show up to work in outfits that seemed like they were meant for attention, not for getting the job done. She'd flirt with the guys in the office when I was around, and I'd ask myself, is this normal? It started making me uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything at first. Then one day, things got a lot more serious. We had an argument at work, nothing too out of the ordinary, just a disagreement about something small. But that argument spiraled out of control. After that, Chloe became distant, and I could tell she was frustrated. The mood at work shifted, and she started acting weird, like she was mad at me for things I didn't even know I'd done. It didn't take long before I noticed that she wasn't just distant. She was acting different. She was cold and at times openly rude, even though she'd been nothing but sweet at first. But the worst part came a few weeks later. One day, out of nowhere, Chloe accused me of something I never saw coming. She said I had assaulted her. This came completely out of left field, and it shook me to my core. I remember feeling like I was in some twisted nightmare where I couldn't escape. She went to HR, reported it, and things quickly spiraled into a full-blown investigation. I was in shock. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but she made it clear to everyone around her that I had hurt her. She even went as far as filing a lawsuit. I was completely blindsided. I had no idea how to handle this situation. I was trying to wrap my head around how someone I had dated, someone I trusted, could do something like this. My world completely flipped upside down. Work became unbearable. I couldn't walk into the office without feeling like everyone was staring at me, judging me for something I didn't do. Even the people who I thought were my friends started to distance themselves. The whispers were everywhere. It was like I had this huge target on my back, and everyone around me was ready to take aim. The investigation dragged on for what felt like forever, but I knew deep down that this wasn't just going to blow over. It felt like Chloe had planned every part of it, and I was stuck in the middle of her scheme. The worst part of it all is the way she played the victim. Every time we were in a meeting, every time I had to defend myself, she would sit there with this sad, pitiful look on her face, acting like I had done the worst thing imaginable. But it wasn't just her face, it was everything. She was relentless. She pushed this narrative that I had somehow turned into the monster, the villain in her life, and I had to constantly remind myself that this was all a lie. I couldn't figure out why she was doing this. What did she have to gain by ruining my life? I thought we were past the drama, but apparently I was wrong. It became clear that Chloe wasn't interested in just moving on. She wasn't going to let me go that easily. I don't know if she wanted to get back at me for the breakup, or if this was all some weird way of keeping control over me. As the lawsuit progressed, the pressure built. I had to get a lawyer. I had to do everything by the book, prove my innocence. Every day I felt like I was living in some twisted version of reality. I kept hoping it would end soon, but it didn't. Chloe kept pushing and pushing. It was like she couldn't let it go. One day I was sitting in a meeting with HR, and Chloe was sitting there across from me, staring at me like she was savoring the moment. It felt like a game to her. She'd already destroyed my reputation at work, but now she was going after my life. She wanted to break me completely. She didn't just want to win. She wanted to make me pay for something I hadn't even done. Eventually, after months of back and forth, Chloe dropped the lawsuit, but the damage was done. People at work still whispered behind my back, and I was left picking up the pieces of my life. I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like if the lawsuit had gone through. But Chloe, she walked away like nothing happened, probably feeling like she won. It took me a long time to recover from everything that happened. I had to leave that job, change my number, and cut off a lot of people who had sided with her. But I'll never forget how I felt during that time. Betrayed, confused, and completely out of control. Looking back, I still don't understand why she did it. Maybe she was hurt, maybe she was angry, but what she did, what she put me through, was beyond anything I could have imagined. And that's the scariest part. You think you know someone, but when you're dealing with a person like that, nothing is ever as it seems. This is something that still makes my stomach turn. It's not the kind of thing you think will ever happen to you. At least I didn't. But sometimes life throws things your way that you're not ready for, no matter how careful you are. Let me start by saying this wasn't just a casual breakup. This was the kind of relationship where everything felt intense. We'd known each other for a while, but things got serious really quickly. Andrew was charming, funny, and everything I thought I wanted in someone. At first, I loved the attention. He would text me constantly, check on me all the time, and make sure I was okay. It was nice at first, but then it started to feel overwhelming. It felt like I was under constant surveillance. I didn't know it then, but it was the first sign of what was coming. We were together for about 6 months before I realized that things weren't as healthy as I thought. Andrew's control over me grew slowly, almost imperceptibly. It started with him picking what I wore, telling me who I could hang out with, and making me feel guilty for spending too much time with my friends. But I didn't see it as controlling at the time. I thought it was just him being protective. But then I started seeing the cracks. I'd be out with friends and feel a weird sense of dread, like I was being watched. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking. Maybe I was. But the more I saw him, the more it started to feel wrong. I couldn't breathe without his approval. I couldn't make decisions without him questioning everything I did. He started showing up places unexpectedly, places I hadn't mentioned to him. I would get home to find him parked down the street, sitting in his car, staring at my house. At first, it was just once in a while, and I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just being thoughtful, checking on me. But that wasn't the case. I ended things with him one night. It wasn't a dramatic breakup or anything like that, just a quiet, simple decision that I needed to move on. I wasn't happy anymore, and I knew it wasn't healthy. Andrew didn't take it well. He didn't get angry at first, but I could tell there was a shift. Something in his eyes changed. The last time I saw him, he was quiet, too quiet, and I remember feeling like I had made a mistake. I didn't realize it then, but that would be the last time he'd leave me alone. The first few days after the breakup were hard. I thought he'd respect my decision. But instead, things got strange really fast. I started noticing that he was showing up everywhere. At work, at the coffee shop I like to go to, even at my friend's house when I wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe it was a coincidence, but it wasn't. One evening, I was walking home from a friend's house when I saw his car parked a few streets down. I stopped in my tracks and tried to pretend like I hadn't seen it, but something in me told me I needed to turn around. I was almost at my house when I saw him walking behind me. I thought it was a trick of the light at first, but no, it was him. My heart started racing. I picked up the pace, my mind telling me to get inside as quickly as possible. I didn't want him to know I had seen him. When I got to my front door, I locked it as quickly as I could and turned off all the lights. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the cops? Should I confront him? But I knew that if I did, it would only make things worse. So I stayed inside, scared to even look out the window. It didn't stop there. Every day after that, I saw him lurking around my neighborhood. Sometimes he'd wait in his car down the street. Sometimes he'd be just walking by my place. Every time I thought I was in the clear, I'd spot him again. The worst part was I wasn't the only one who noticed. My friends started mentioning it too. They told me they had seen him hanging around my workplace or stopping by my old apartment. At first, I didn't know how to explain it. I kept telling them it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. It started to get worse, though. One night, I woke up to ears scratching at my window. It was the middle of the night, and I was frozen in fear. I tried to ignore it, hoping I was just imagining things, but it got louder. I grabbed my phone and texted my best friend to let her know what was happening. As I was typing the message, I saw his face, his shadow, really on the other side of the window. I couldn't breathe. I don't remember how long I stayed there, sitting in my bed with my phone pressed against my ear, too scared to move. Eventually, I heard him walk away. The sound of his footsteps echoed down the street, and I stayed in my room until the sun came up. I didn't sleep that night. After that, I made the decision to move. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly looking over my shoulder. I changed my number, blocked him on social media, and tried my best to cut all ties. But that wasn't the end of it. Even after I moved, I would still get random messages from unknown numbers, people telling me they'd seen him in the area. Sometimes I'd get weird messages from people I didn't know, asking if I was okay or telling me they had seen Andrew following me. I didn't know if he kept finding me, but he always seemed to be a step behind. Eventually, I had to file a restraining order. That was when I finally realized how deep it had all gone. This wasn't just about me being paranoid. It was real, and it was dangerous. I had to take serious steps to protect myself. Andrew never really understood that it was over. He never accepted it. And that's the part that still gets to me. This man who I once thought I knew, who I thought I could trust, became something entirely different. The worst part is, even now, years later, I can't help but wonder if I'll ever fully escape the feeling that he's still watching me, lurking in the shadows. I never thought an ex could turn into a stalker, but now I know, and it still scares me. This is something I still can't wrap my head around. It's been a while since it happened, but I still remember the moment as if it were yesterday. I've heard people talk about crazy exes before, but I never thought my own ex would cross such a line. I guess when I think about it now, I should have seen the signs, but it's still hard to believe what she did. Her name was Shauna. We had been together for about 2 years, and while things weren't perfect, I didn't think anything was that wrong. We had the usual ups and downs, but like any relationship, we made it work. Or so I thought. It wasn't until we broke up that I realized just how messed up things had really gotten. But what she did after we split, it left me shaken, angry, and downright confused. I'd never thought a breakup could escalate like this. We had our moments, but Shauna had always seemed normal enough to me. Sure, she was a little intense, maybe even controlling at times, but nothing that screamed dangerous or unstable. That was until the breakup. I don't even think I realized how much I had been putting up with until it was too late. It all started on a Saturday. I remember it well because it was the day I decided enough was enough. I couldn't handle the constant fighting anymore, the manipulation, the feeling like I was walking on eggshells. We were both young, figuring things out, and it was obvious we weren't happy. When I told her I wanted to break up, she didn't react the way I thought she would. She didn't cry or beg me to stay. Instead, she went silent for a while. At first, I thought it was just shock, but that silence, it didn't feel right. She didn't fight me. She didn't argue. She didn't even seem upset. And that's what got under my skin. It felt like she was just processing it in a weird way, like she was taking her time to think about the next step in whatever twisted game she was playing. But I didn't know how deep things really went until it was too late. I had a dog, a golden retriever named Max. He was my buddy, my little guy. I got him when I was in college, and he was my constant companion. I took care of him, I loved him, and he loved me back. Max was part of my world, part of the life I built, and when Sean and I broke up, I figured everything would be fine. Max was mine, and I was sure there was no way she'd even think about taking him. I was wrong. A few days after we broke up, Max went missing. I looked everywhere for him. I posted on social media, made flyers, called local shelters, and even knocked on doors. But I couldn't find him. I was frantic. This wasn't like him. He was always within a few feet of me or close to the house. It didn't make sense. I thought maybe he had gotten out by accident. Maybe someone had found him, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. I had that gut feeling. And then it hit me, Shauna. I didn't want to believe it, but the thought kept gnawing at me. I hadn't seen her since the breakup, and she hadn't tried to contact me in any way. I felt uneasy. I thought maybe I was just paranoid, but then I remembered something weird that happened the day we broke up. Shauna had asked me if she could borrow Max for a walk. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now thinking back, it felt off. I told her no, of course, but now I couldn't help but wonder if that was when she had already planned to take him. I decided to reach out to her, asking if she knew where Max was. At first, she played it cool. She told me she hadn't seen him and acted like I was overreacting. But then, the longer I thought about it, the more I felt like something was definitely wrong. I went over to her apartment, not really expecting her to answer the door, but I had to see for myself. And when she opened the door and greeted me with that weird, almost smug smile, I knew something was up. I asked her point blank if she had taken Max. She stood there for a moment like she was weighing her options, then casually shrugged. Maybe, she said, and I could feel my blood start to boil. She went on to tell me she wasn't going to give him back just because I said so. In that moment, I could see it. The jealousy, the bitterness. It was all there. She wasn't just mad at me for breaking up with her. She was mad because she felt like I had taken something from her. And Max, well, he was her way of keeping control over me even after we were done. She told me she had earned Max. That somehow, because she'd spent time with him, she had a right to keep him. My heart sank. This was no longer about the dog. This was about power, control, and manipulation. I begged her to give him back, but she just smirked. She wasn't going to let me have him, not without a fight. I don't know what came over me. I left her apartment and called the police. This wasn't just petty. She had taken my dog, and that was something I couldn't let go. When the officers arrived, Shauna acted like I was the one causing a scene, but after some questioning, they eventually took her in for theft. I had all the proof I needed, text messages, photos, and a statement from the landlord who had seen her walk out with Max a few days ago. It felt like a nightmare. I couldn't believe I was in this situation. I had trusted her, and now she'd crossed a line I didn't even know existed. After everything, I just wanted my dog back, but the emotional toll was huge. It wasn't just about Max anymore. It was about the fact that she had betrayed me in the most twisted way possible. In the end, Shauna was arrested and I got Max back. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had underestimated her. She wasn't just some girl who got mad after a breakup. She was someone who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. And in the end, I learned the hard way that sometimes, when you think you've gotten rid of a toxic person, they find another way to hurt you. I'll never forget what she did, and honestly, I'll never trust someone the same way again. I used to love painting. It was my thing. It was my escape, really. Whenever life got too loud or stressful, I'd just grab a canvas and let everything pour out through colors and strokes. But that all changed the moment Daniel came into my life. I'd never expected something so simple, falling for someone, to turn into something so controlling, so isolating, and ultimately so terrifying. When we first met, Daniel seemed perfect. He was charming, funny, and all around sweet. He made me feel seen, appreciated, and for a while, it felt like a fairy tale. But I didn't realize at the time that fairy tales have villains. I never expected that he'd turn into the kind of person who would erase every part of me that wasn't his idea of perfect. It started off small, as these things usually do. He'd make little comments about my hobbies, how I spent too much time on my art, how I should focus more on us than painting or hanging out with my friends. At first, it seemed harmless, like a simple concern. He just wanted to spend more time with me, right? I thought, maybe I've been spending too much time on my own stuff. Maybe I should prioritize our relationship more. So I started cutting back. I stopped painting as much, not because I wanted to, but because I thought it would make him happy. I even skipped a few art classes that I loved just so I could hang out with him. It didn't feel like a big deal. It wasn't like I was giving up everything, just making a few sacrifices. But little by little, those sacrifices turned into bigger changes. Then he started isolating me from my friends. At first, it was innocent. He'd suggest we do something instead of me going out. Why do you need to hang out with your friends so much? He'd ask. We could do something fun, just the two of us. Slowly, I found myself saying no to plans I would normally be excited about. I stopped seeing my best friend, stopped going to parties or casual get-togethers. and I didn't even realize it was happening until it was too late. The most disturbing part was how he'd twist things. He didn't just make me feel guilty for hanging out with other people. He made me feel like I was a bad person for doing it. He'd tell me that if I really loved him, I wouldn't want to leave him alone. He'd get quiet, distant, and cold whenever I made plans without him, and it started to make me question myself. I thought maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I was wrong for wanting to have time for myself. But it didn't stop there. Once he'd have me isolated, that's when he really started to push the boundaries. He started making me feel like my hobbies were a waste of time. He'd look at my paintings, my sketchbooks, the unfinished canvases, and scoff. "You really think this is important?" He'd ask like it was a joke. "You could be doing something useful, something that actually matters. Art doesn't pay the bills." His words didn't just sting. They dug into my brain, and eventually I began to believe them. I quit going to my art classes altogether. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't, I was somehow failing him. I felt like I was failing our relationship every time I painted or spent time on anything that wasn't him. Eventually, it wasn't just my art classes. I stopped doing everything I loved, reading, going for walks, hanging out with people who weren't him. My entire world became Daniel. What scared me the most wasn't even the emotional manipulation at first. It was how seamlessly it happened. At first, I thought I was just making adjustments for the relationship, just compromising. But I didn't realize how much I was losing myself. He had this way of making everything feel like it was my choice, like I was the one making the decisions. I never saw the patterns forming, the way my hobbies and passions slowly vanished from my life until they were nothing but memories. It wasn't until I had completely shut myself off from everyone that I realized I was completely alone. But the real horror didn't come until I started trying to break free. After months of isolation, I started to get the nerve to pick up my brushes again. I would sneak into my bedroom when he wasn't home, just to get a few minutes of peace, to do something that was mine and mine alone. But it wasn't long before he caught on. He'd come home early and find me painting, and the look on his face, it was like I had betrayed him, like I had done something unforgivable. One day, I was working on a piece I'd been sketching for weeks. I'd gotten so lost in it, I didn't even hear him come in. When I finally looked up, there he was, standing in the doorway, his eyes cold and angry. I didn't know what to say, but I knew something was off. His entire posture screamed that he was furious, like he'd been holding this anger inside for a while. "I thought you said you were done with this," he said, his voice tight. I tried to explain, tried to tell him how much painting meant to me, but he just wouldn't listen. He started tearing down my canvases. He'd grab my brushes and throw them across the room, smashing them into pieces. It wasn't just the art he was destroying. It was everything that made me feel like myself. He didn't want just my time, he wanted my soul. He wanted everything to revolve around him. That was the day I knew I had to leave. I don't know what clicked, but something inside me snapped. I realized that if I stayed, I'd lose who I was entirely. I'd already lost so much, and I wasn't about to let him take everything. I packed my things that night, quietly, quickly, and left without a word. I didn't care where I went. I just needed to get away from him, from the life he had stolen from me. Looking back, I'm still haunted by how much control he had over me. He didn't just take away my hobbies. He took away my identity. It took me a long time to get back to painting, to even remember what it felt like to pick up a brush without feeling guilty or like I was doing something wrong. It was a long, painful process, but I got there. And now I paint for myself, no one else. It's been months since I left, but the scars from that relationship are still with me. I don't know what's worse, the isolation or the realization that I let it happen for so long. But I'm here now, and I'm slowly getting back to who I was before Daniel, and I won't let anyone take that away from me again. This story is probably one of the weirdest, most disturbing things that's ever happened to me. I still can't fully wrap my head around it. Dina was the girl I dated for almost a year, and let me tell you, she seemed pretty normal in the beginning. We met through some mutual friends, and at first, everything seemed fine. She was sweet, funny, and we had a lot in common. But things started to get strange, real strange. I didn't notice it at first, but in hindsight, there were little red flags everywhere that I just ignored. If I paid attention, I would have realized how quickly things were heading downhill. One of the first things that tipped me off was her obsession with her church. I wasn't exactly religious, but I didn't mind her going to church. I was fine with her beliefs. She wasn't trying to push anything on me, but the deeper she got into it, the weirder it got. She started mentioning things about spiritual warfare and how we all have a demon inside of us. But I just thought it was something she'd heard in church and was really passionate about. I didn't think much of it, but it became a regular part of her speech. And at first, it was kind of funny. Then it started getting creepy. There was one night, towards the end of our relationship, when I was hanging out at her place. She started talking about how people carry evil energy and how she could see it in people. She would say stuff like, "I can just feel the darkness in you." I didn't know how to react to that. I laughed it off, but after a while, it started making me uncomfortable. I began to notice that Dina's behavior was becoming more obsessive, almost like she was trying to convince herself of something. It was like she was getting lost in her own thoughts, and I wasn't sure if I was the one she was worried about or if she was just genuinely losing her grip on reality. One night, she told me she had to pray over me. I didn't think it was a big deal at first, so I just sat there while she went on about her spiritual cleansing. I didn't take it seriously. It was just Dina being Dina, right? But the next morning, she was acting different. She kept saying that something wasn't right with me, that I had dark energy and there was something wrong in my soul. She got super intense, telling me that I needed help. And that's when things took a turn. A few days later, I got a message from her that I still can't forget. She said that she had talked to her pastor, and he believed that I had a devil inside of me. I honestly thought she was joking, but as I read the message again, I realized she was serious. I wasn't some bad person, I wasn't into anything weird, and I didn't even know where this was coming from. But that wasn't even the craziest part. A few hours later, she called me, and in a serious tone, she told me that the pastor wanted to exorcise me. I couldn't believe it. It felt like a bad joke, like some twisted movie plot. But Dina was completely serious. She told me the pastor said I had to get rid of the evil spirit that was inside me, and she insisted that it would only be for my own good. I thought about walking away right then, but things had already gotten so strange, and honestly, I was scared. What would happen if I told her I wasn't going through with it? I didn't want to deal with the fallout, and she was so insistent. She told me it would help me, that it would make me a better person. She told me the pastor was ready to help, and that it was the only way to fix me. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't just walk away, but I went along with it. Maybe it was because I cared about her, or maybe I was just afraid of what might happen if I didn't. So I agreed to go with her to her church for this session. I should have known then that things were going to go terribly wrong. When I showed up, it was even worse than I could have imagined. The pastor was this older guy with a stern look on his face. I don't think I've ever felt so out of place in my life. Dina was all too eager to get things started, and she kept saying how this was going to save me. I tried to joke around to make light of the situation, but no one was laughing. The pastor started reading scripture and asking me to kneel. I was in a full-on panic at this point, but there was no turning back. Dina looked at me with this intense, almost manic expression, like she was convinced that I was some kind of monster. It got worse from there. The pastor started speaking in a language I didn't understand, and Dina stood behind me, praying with him. I was sweating, my heart was pounding, and I just wanted to get the hell out of there. The atmosphere was so heavy, like everyone in the room thought I was some kind of evil presence. At one point, I thought I saw Dina looking at me with a strange look, like she was almost proud of what was happening. That's when I realized that this wasn't just about helping me. It was about her belief in her own twisted version of saving me. Eventually, they stopped, and I left there feeling like I had just been through some bizarre nightmare. Dina kept texting me after that, telling me how I was cleansed, how the devil inside of me was gone. I couldn't even process what had just happened. That was the last straw. I cut off contact with her for good after that. I was completely shaken, both physically and mentally. I'll never forget the look on Dina's face during that whole ordeal. She wasn't concerned for me. She wasn't trying to help me. It was like she had found some twisted sense of purpose in thinking she could fix me. What made it worse was that I had trusted her, and she used that trust to drag me into something that felt like a cult. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. I have no idea what happened with Dina or what she believed. All I know is that after that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just a pawn in some crazy game she was playing in her head. It was one of the most disturbing experiences of my life, and I'll never forget the way she looked at me as if she had saved me. I'll never forget the night everything changed. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, just me and my thoughts, finally having some peace after a brutal breakup. But Shelley, my ex, had other plans. It wasn't just that we ended things, it was how she ended things. The kind of stuff that doesn't just mess with your head, but leaves a mark. Literally. It all started about a month before when she started acting off. Shelley and I were together for 2 years and we had our ups and downs like any couple. But towards the end, I noticed she was different. She became distant. She'd look at her phone constantly, start fights over the smallest things, and then go cold, not saying much when I tried to talk about it. I figured it was just stress, maybe work or something. I never thought much of it until the night I found out she'd been snooping through my stuff. I came home one evening, tired from work, ready to crash. When I walked into my apartment, the first thing I saw was her sitting on the couch, looking up at me with this weird smile. The kind of smile you get when someone's holding something back. She didn't even greet me properly. Instead, she asked me in a calm tone, "You want to explain this?" She was holding my phone in her hand, but I didn't know what she was talking about. I wasn't hiding anything. I hadn't been texting anyone weird or doing anything shady, but the look in her eyes told me I was wrong. I tried to stay cool, but she kept pushing, and that's when I saw it, her finger pointing at a message on my screen. It was just some casual conversation I had with a coworker. Nothing inappropriate, just work stuff. Still to her, it was the spark she needed to set the whole thing off. "I knew you were cheating on me," she said, her voice so cold, like a knife digging in. I tried to explain, tried to tell her there was nothing going on, but she wasn't having it. The more I tried to defend myself, the more she believed I was guilty. The situation went downhill fast. She went from upset to absolutely unhinged. She locked herself in the bathroom, and I could hear her crying through the door. I felt like I was losing my mind trying to figure out what was going on. I thought we were over the worst of it, but as the night went on, I realized I was wrong. That night, she showed up at my door again. I wasn't expecting it, but there she was, standing in front of me with her bag slung over her shoulder. I didn't know if I should let her in, but she wasn't asking. She just barged in, and before I could even process what was happening, she locked the door behind her. I tried to talk to her to calm her down, but there was no talking to her anymore. Shelley was in full-blown breakdown mode. She started pacing back and forth, muttering things I couldn't even understand. That's when I saw the permanent marker in her hand. At first, I didn't get it, but then she grabbed me by the shirt and shoved me down onto the couch. I didn't even see it coming. Before I could ask what she was doing, she pressed the marker to my forehead. The sting of the tip of the marker was sharp, like a needle, but it didn't hurt that much. What hurt was what she was writing. Slowly, she scrawled across my skin, and I saw what she was doing. She was writing the word cheater in big, bold letters across my forehead. I tried to push her away, but she was stronger than I expected. Her hands gripped my face with surprising force, keeping me still while she finished. It felt like hours, even though it was probably just a few minutes. The whole time, I was in complete shock. I had no idea how to react. Part of me wanted to scream, but I didn't want to escalate things. When she finally stepped back, she looked at her work with a twisted sort of satisfaction, as if she had just accomplished some final act of revenge. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to cry, to scream, to fight back, but I was frozen. It wasn't just a marker on my skin. It was everything. The betrayal, the way she twisted everything I said, the way she believed something that wasn't true. I wiped at my forehead, but the marker was stubborn. It was permanent. I could still feel the ink even after I tried washing my face. The word cheater was there, glaring at me every time I looked in the mirror. I told her over and over that I hadn't cheated. I tried to convince her that the message was harmless, but the more I spoke, the more she became enraged. It didn't matter. She'd already made up her mind. After that night, she left. She just walked out, leaving me standing there, alone in my apartment with a permanent reminder of something I didn't do. The worst part, the guilt she planted in my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I walked into her room, I felt eyes on me, like people could see the word written on my face even when they didn't. I felt like I was wearing a scarlet letter, even though I had done nothing wrong. The next day was a nightmare. I tried everything to get the marker off, rubbing alcohol, scrubbing with soap, even trying to use makeup to cover it up, but nothing worked. The word stayed there staring back at me, no matter how hard I tried to get rid of it. It was like it was burned into my skin, a constant reminder of the chaos Shelley had unleashed. For weeks, I had to deal with the aftermath. It wasn't just the marker on my forehead that haunted me. It was the way she twisted everything. People at work started whispering, even though I hadn't told anyone what really happened. Shelley had already painted the picture. I was the cheater. I was a bad guy. Things slowly started to settle down after that, but I'd never be the same. The scar on my forehead faded eventually, but the memory of what happened never did. It was a constant reminder of how a person can destroy you, not with physical violence, but with words and lies. And that's the scariest thing of all. This story still gives me chills when I think about it. I don't even know where to start, but let's just say that sometimes life takes a turn in ways you never expect, and you don't always see the signs until it's too late. I used to date Chloe. We met at work, super casual, nothing out of the ordinary at first. She was friendly, funny, and we hit it off pretty quickly. We'd grab coffee together during breaks, chat about whatever was going on at the office, and spend time together outside of work. It wasn't anything serious, but it felt easy. You know that kind of connection where it just makes sense? That was us. I'm not going to sit here and say I was perfect. We had our problems, sure. There were misunderstandings and we argued a few times, but nothing that seemed too big to handle. Things got tricky when we started getting closer, though. Chloe was one of those people who always wanted to be the center of attention. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being confident. But she always pushed the boundaries, and I started to notice she didn't like when I didn't give her the attention she wanted. I thought maybe it was just the nature of our relationship, but it started getting worse. We'd be at work, and I'd hear her talking to people about personal stuff, stuff that should have stayed between us. There were little things that bugged me, like she'd show up to work in outfits that seemed like they were meant for attention, not for getting the job done. She'd flirt with the guys in the office when I was around, and I'd ask myself, is this normal? It started making me uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything at first. Then one day, things got a lot more serious. We had an argument at work, nothing too out of the ordinary, just a disagreement about something small. But that argument spiraled out of control. After that, Chloe became distant, and I could tell she was frustrated. The mood at work shifted, and she started acting weird, like she was mad at me for things I didn't even know I'd done. It didn't take long before I noticed that she wasn't just distant. She was acting different. She was cold and at times openly rude, even though she'd been nothing but sweet at first. But the worst part came a few weeks later. One day, out of nowhere, Chloe accused me of something I never saw coming. She said I had assaulted her. This came completely out of left field, and it shook me to my core. I remember feeling like I was in some twisted nightmare where I couldn't escape. She went to HR, reported it, and things quickly spiraled into a full-blown investigation. I was in shock. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but she made it clear to everyone around her that I had hurt her. She even went as far as filing a lawsuit. I was completely blindsided. I had no idea how to handle this situation. I was trying to wrap my head around how someone I had dated, someone I trusted, could do something like this. My world completely flipped upside down. Work became unbearable. I couldn't walk into the office without feeling like everyone was staring at me, judging me for something I didn't do. Even the people who I thought were my friends started to distance themselves. The whispers were everywhere. It was like I had this huge target on my back, and everyone around me was ready to take aim. The investigation dragged on for what felt like forever, but I knew deep down that this wasn't just going to blow over. It felt like Clove had planned every part of it, and I was stuck in the middle of her scheme. The worst part of it all was the way she played the victim. Every time we were in a meeting, every time I had to defend myself, she would sit there with this sad, pitiful look on her face, acting like I had done the worst thing imaginable. But it wasn't just her face. It was everything. She was relentless. She pushed this narrative that I had somehow turned into the monster, the villain in her life, and I had to constantly remind myself that this was all a lie. I couldn't figure out why she was doing this. What did she have to gain by ruining my life? I thought we were past the drama, but apparently I was wrong. It became clear that Chloe wasn't interested in just moving on. She wasn't going to let me go that easily. I don't know if she wanted to get back at me for the breakup or if this was all some weird way of keeping control over me. As the lawsuit progressed, the pressure built. I had to get a lawyer. I had to do everything by the book, prove my innocence. Every day, I felt like I was living in some twisted version of reality. I kept hoping it would end soon, but it didn't. Chloe kept pushing and pushing. It was like she couldn't let it go. One day, I was sitting in a meeting with HR, and Chloe was sitting there across from me, staring at me like she was savoring the moment. It felt like a game to her. She'd already destroyed my reputation at work, but now she was going after my life. She wanted to break me completely. She didn't just want to win. She wanted to make me pay for something I hadn't even done. Eventually, after months of back and forth, Chloe dropped the lawsuit, but the damage was done. People at work still whispered behind my back, and I was left picking up the pieces of my life. I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like if the lawsuit had gone through. But Chloe, she walked away like nothing happened, probably feeling like she won. It took me a long time to recover from everything that happened. I had to leave that job, change my number, and cut off a lot of people who had sided with her. I'll never forget how I felt during that time. Betrayed, confused, and completely out of control. Looking back, I still don't understand why she did. Maybe she was hurt, maybe she was angry, but what she did, what she put me through, was beyond anything I could have imagined. And that's the scariest part. You think you know someone, but when you're dealing with a person like that, nothing is ever as it seems. This is something that still makes my stomach turn. It's not the kind of thing you think will ever happen to you. At least I didn't. But sometimes life throws things your way that you're not ready for, no matter how careful you are. Let me start by saying this wasn't just a casual breakup. This was the kind of relationship where everything felt intense. We had known each other for a while, but things got serious really quickly. Andrew was charming, funny, and everything I thought I wanted in someone. At first, I loved the attention. He would text me constantly, check up on me all the time, and make sure I was okay. It was nice at first, but then it started to feel overwhelming. It felt like I was under constant surveillance. I didn't know it then, but it was the first sign of what was coming. We were together for about 6 months before I realized that things weren't as healthy as I thought. Andrew's control over me grew slowly, almost imperceptibly. It started with him picking what I wore, telling me who I could hang out with, and making me feel guilty for spending too much time with my friends. But I didn't see it as controlling at the time. I thought it was just him being protective. But then I started seeing the cracks. I'd be out with friends and feel a weird sense of dread, like I was being watched. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking. Maybe I was. But the more I saw him, the more it started to feel wrong. I couldn't breathe without his approval. I couldn't make decisions without him questioning everything I did. He started showing up places unexpectedly, places I hadn't mentioned to him. I would get home to find him parked down the street, sitting in his car, staring at my house. At first, it was just once in a while, and I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just being thoughtful, checking on me. But that wasn't the case. I ended things with him one night. It wasn't a dramatic breakup or anything like that, just a quiet, simple decision that I needed to move on. I wasn't happy anymore, and I knew it wasn't healthy. Andrew didn't take it well. He didn't get angry at first, but I could tell there was a shift. Something in his eyes changed. The last time I saw him, he was quiet, too quiet, and I remember feeling like I had made a mistake. I didn't realize it then, but that would be the last time he'd leave me alone. The first few days after the breakup were hard. I thought he'd respect my decision. But instead, things got strange really fast. I started noticing that he was showing up everywhere. At my work, at the coffee shop I like to go to, even at my friend's house when I wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe it was a coincidence, but it wasn't. One evening, I was walking home from a friend's house when I saw his car parked a few streets down. I stopped in my tracks and tried to pretend like I hadn't seen it, but something in me told me I needed to turn around. I was almost at my house when I saw him walking behind me. I thought it was a trick of the light at first, but no, it was him. My heart started racing. I picked up the pace, my mind telling me to get inside as quickly as possible. I didn't want him to know I had seen him. When I got to my front door, I locked it as quickly as I could and turned off all the lights. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the cops? Should I confront him? But I knew that if I did, it would only make things worse. So I stayed inside, scared to even look out the window. It didn't stop there. Every day after that, I saw him lurking around my neighborhood. Sometimes he'd wait in his car down the street. Sometimes he'd be just walking by my place. Every time I thought I was in the clear, I'd spot him again. The worst part was I wasn't the only one who noticed. My friends started mentioning it too. They told me they had seen him hanging around my workplace or stopping by my old apartment. At first, I didn't know how to explain it. I kept telling them it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. It started to get worse, though. One night, I woke up to ears scratching at my window. It was the middle of the night, and I was frozen in fear. I tried to ignore it, hoping I was just imagining things, but it got louder. I grabbed my phone and texted my best friend to let her know what was happening. As I was typing the message, I saw his face. Its shadow, really, on the other side of the window. I couldn't breathe. I don't remember how long I stayed there, sitting in my bed with my phone pressed against my ear, too scared to move. Eventually, I heard him walk away. The sound of his footsteps echoed down the street, and I stayed in my room until the sun came up. I didn't sleep that night. After that, I made the decision to move. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly looking over my shoulder. I changed my number, blocked him on social media, and tried my best to cut all ties. But that wasn't the end of it. Even after I moved, I would still get random messages from unknown numbers, people telling me they'd seen him in the area. Sometimes I'd get weird messages from people I didn't know, asking if I was okay or telling me they had seen Andrew following me. I didn't know how he kept finding me, but he always seemed to be a step behind. Eventually, I had to file a restraining order. That was when I finally realized how deep it had all gone. This wasn't just about me being paranoid. It was real, and it was dangerous. I had to take serious steps to protect myself. Andrew never really understood that it was over. He never accepted it. And that's the part that still gets to me. This man who I once thought I knew, who I thought I could trust, became something entirely different. The worst part is, even now, years later, I can't help but wonder if I'll ever fully escape the feeling that he's still watching me, lurking in the shadows. I'd never thought an ex could turn into a stalker, but now I know, and it still scares me.